The massacre at Crimson Dawn. The last peaceful morning colony administrator, Sarah Chen, stood on the observation deck of Crimson Dawn's central hub, watching the twin suns of Zerion 7 paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and gold. Below her, the settlement stretched 4 kilometers across the fertile plains, a testament to human determination and ingenuity. Agricultural domes gleamed like pearls scattered across the landscape, while research facilities hummed with the quiet activity of scientific discovery. Children laughed in the recreational areas, their voices carrying on the gentle morning breeze that rustled through the carefully cultivated earth trees that now called this alien world home. 75,000 souls called Crimson Dawn home. They were farmers who had transformed barren soil into productive farmland, scientists who studied the unique ecosystem of Zerion 7, engineers who had built a thriving community from nothing but determination and hope. Families had grown here, children had been born under alien stars, and dreams had taken root in foreign soil. It was humanity at its finest, reaching across the void to build something beautiful and lasting. Sarah smiled as she watched Dr. Michael Torres leading a group of young students through the botanical gardens, explaining how they had adapted earth plants to thrive in the slightly different atmospheric composition of their new world. In the distance, construction crews were putting the finishing touches on the new medical center, a facility that would serve not just the human colonists, but also provide aid to any passing travelers who might need assistance. This was the human way to build, to help, to create something better than what came before. The morning routine continued as it had for the past 8 years since the colony's establishment. Farmers checked their crops, researchers analyzed their data, children attended their lessons, and parents worked to build a better future for the next generation. Communication arrays maintained contact with Earth and other human settlements, sharing discoveries and staying connected to the greater human family spread across the stars. Life was good, peaceful, and full of promise. None of them knew they had less than an hour to live. The Krillian Empire arrives war. Marshal Vextar, grim, stood 8 feet tall, his chitinous exoskeleton gleaming under the harsh lights of his flagships. Command Bridge. His 4 eyes scanned the tactical displays, showing the peaceful human settlement below, while his mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among his species. The Krillian Empire had been expanding across this sector of space for 3 centuries, and they had perfected the art of intimidation through swift, brutal demonstrations of power. The humans had been spreading too quickly, establishing colonies in systems the Krillian Empire considered their rightful territory. These mammals, with their soft skin and weak bodies, had somehow managed to develop faster than light travel and were now scattered across dozens of worlds. It was an affront to the natural order, where the strong ruled and the weak served or died. Vexter had been tasked with sending a message that would stop this human expansion before it became a real problem. Target analysis complete. War Marshal reported his tactical officer, a younger Krillian whose carapace still bore the darker colors of youth. The settlement shows no military installations, no defensive systems, no armed vessels. Population: approximately 75,000, primarily engaged in agriculture and research activities. Vextar's mandibles clicked faster, the Krillian equivalent of laughter. Perfect. A soft target that will maximize the psychological impact. These humans need to learn that their expansion into Krillian space comes with consequences. He gestured with one of his 4 arms toward the planet below. Commence orbital bombardment. Leave nothing alive. I want this transmission sent to every human world as a lesson. The Krillian fleet consisted of 12 heavy cruisers, each armed with plasma bombardment cannons capable of turning solid rock into molten slag. They had used these weapons to subjugate dozens of species, to reduce proud civilizations to ash and memory. The technology was ancient by galactic standards, but effective. Raw, destructive power that left no doubt about Krillian superiority. Recording. Systems activated. War Marshal. The humans will see exactly what happens to those who trespass in our territory. The slaughter begins. The first plasma bolt struck Crimson Dawn's central hub at exactly 9:47 local time. Sarah Chen had just finished her morning coffee and was reviewing the latest agricultural reports when the building simply ceased to exist. Vaporized in a column of superheated energy that reached temperatures comparable to a star's core. She never felt pain, never had time to scream. One moment she was planning the day's activities. The next she was scattered atoms mixing with the alien atmosphere. The bombardment was methodical and thorough. Each dome, each building, each carefully tended garden disappeared under the relentless rain of plasma fire. The Krillians had studied human architecture and psychology. They knew exactly how to maximize both physical destruction and emotional impact. Children's playgrounds melted into twisted metal sculptures. Libraries full of human knowledge and literature became brief flares of light. The medical center that had been scheduled to open next week was reduced to a crater that would glow with residual radiation for centuries. Dr. Torres tried to shield his students when the botanical gardens came under attack, but plasma fire makes no distinction between the brave and the cowardly, the old and the young. The earth trees that had taken 8 years to establish roots in alien soil burned for exactly 17 seconds before being reduced to carbon and memory. The children he had been teaching about photosynthesis and adaptation became brief shadows. On superheated ground, in the residential sectors, families huddled together in their final moments. Parents held their children, spouses reached for each other, and grandparents whispered prayers to gods who seemed very far away indeed. The Krillian bombardment was precise enough to ensure that no bunker, no shelter, no hiding place could offer protection. They had done this before to other species, other worlds, other civilizations that had dared to exist in space. The Krillians claimed as their own. The communication arrays were destroyed early in the attack, cutting off any chance for distress calls or final messages home. The Krillians wanted their lesson to arrive as a complete surprise, a fait accompli that would maximize the psychological impact on the human government and population. They had learned through centuries of conquest that hope was more dangerous than weapons, better to crush it completely than allow it to fester and grow into resistance. The message is sent 2 minutes after the bombardment began. Crimson Dawn colony no longer existed, where 75,000 humans had lived, worked, dreamed, and built their future. There was now only a scarred wasteland of glass and ash. The very ground had been fused into a crystalline surface that reflected the twin suns in patterns of distorted light. Radiation levels would keep the planet uninhabitable for at least 1,000 years. Vexstar reviewed the recording with professional satisfaction. The footage showed the systematic destruction in perfect detail, buildings vaporizing, people running in panic before being consumed by plasma fire, children's toys melting in the intense heat. It was a masterpiece of intimidation, calculated to inspire exactly the right mixture of grief, rage, and most importantly, fear in the human population. Transmit the recording to their primary world he ordered. Include the standard warning about territorial violations and consequences for further expansion. Make sure every human colony receives a copy. I want them to understand that this is what happens when inferior species challenge Krillian dominance. The message probe was launched with faster-than-light capability, carrying its horrific cargo toward Earth and the other human settlements. It would take approximately 3 weeks to reach Sol System, where it would be received by Earth's communications network and distributed according to Krillian specifications. The timing was deliberate, long enough for hope to build that perhaps their colony had simply experienced technical difficulties, short enough to prevent any organized response. Vextar's tactical screens showed the successful completion of their mission. No human survivors, no intact structures, no possibility of salvage or reconstruction. Crimson Dawn had been erased from existence as thoroughly as if it had never been built. The War Marshal felt the deep satisfaction that came from a job well done, a message clearly sent, a lesson properly taught. Set course for the border stations, he commanded. Our work here is finished. The humans will receive our gift in 3 weeks, and then we'll see how eager they are to continue their expansion into our space. His mandibles clicked with anticipation as he imagined the terror and despair his message would cause among the soft-skinned mammals who had dared to challenge Krillian supremacy. The fleet departed Zerion 7, leaving behind only radioactive ruins, and the silence of 75,000 voices that would never speak again. In 3 weeks, Earth would learn what happened to Crimson Dawn, and then, Vextar was certain, humanity would learn to fear the Krillian Empire. He had no idea that he had just signed his species' death warrant. The reckoning Earth receives the message. Admiral Marcus Thompson sat in the secure briefing room deep beneath the Pentagon, his weathered face illuminated by the holographic display that showed the final moments of Crimson Dawn colony. At 60 years old, he had served through 3 interstellar conflicts and thought he had seen the worst that the galaxy could offer. He was wrong. The recording played for the 7th time, and with each viewing, the cold fury in his chest grew stronger. 75,000 people, families he had personally approved for colonization, children who had never known Earth but carried humanity's dreams in their DNA, scientists whose research might have benefited billions, all reduced to ash and silence by creatures who saw genocide as a diplomatic message. The Krillian transmission was clear in its intent. This was what happened to humans who dared to expand beyond their assigned boundaries. How long since? We lost contact with Crimson Dawn, Thompson asked, though he already knew the answer. 3 weeks and 4 days, sir, replied Commander Lisa Park, his intelligence chief. The colony's last scheduled transmission never arrived. We assumed it was equipment failure or solar interference. She paused, her own voice thick with suppressed emotion. We were planning to send a supply ship next month. The other members of the United Earth Council sat in stunned silence around the conference table. President Rodriguez stared at the holographic display where children's playgrounds had become twisted metal. Secretary of Defense Harrison kept replaying the moment when the medical center, built to help anyone who needed aid, had been vaporized by beings who understood only violence. Trade Commissioner Nakamura had known, personally, many of the agricultural specialists who had volunteered for the Crimson Dawn mission. They're threatening our other colonies, observed Ambassador Chen, Sarah's sister-in-law, who had helped establish the diplomatic protocols for human expansion. This isn't just about Crimson Dawn. They're telling us to stop exploring, stop growing, stop being human. Thompson stood and walked to the tactical display showing human space. 47 colonies spread across 31 systems, each one now a potential target for Krillian lessons. Millions of human lives hanging in the balance while alien monsters decided which settlement to erase next. The weight of command had never felt heavier, but his voice remained steady when he spoke. Implementation of Protocol 7, effective immediately, he announced. Complete communications blackout with all colonies. No transmissions in or out of Sol system. Full military mobilization under the National Defense Emergency Act. Dr. Vasquez, I need to see you privately after this briefing. The silent months. Dr. Elena Vasquez had spent her career pushing the boundaries of physics, but nothing had prepared her for the resources suddenly at her disposal. Every laboratory on Earth, every research facility, every university physics department was now working on a single project codenamed Nemesis. The official story was classified weapons research in response to the Krillian threat. The reality was far more ambitious and terrifying. We're not just building better guns, she explained to her assembled team of humanity's greatest scientific minds. We're rewriting the rules of warfare itself. The Krillians think they understand power because they have bigger cannons and thicker armor. They're about to learn that intelligence beats brute force every single time. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, quantum archaeology, the study of information patterns left behind by destroyed matter. Dr. James Wright, a theoretical physicist who had been studying the background radiation signatures of ancient supernovas, realized that the quantum signatures of the Crimson Dawn massacre were still detectable in space-time itself. The atoms that had once been human colonists retained a kind of memory, an echo of their organized state before. The Krillian plasma fire had scattered them. Every atom remembers what it used to be, Wright explained to the engineering teams. We can use that memory, that quantum resonance, to create weapons that specifically target the molecular structures that destroyed our people. We're going to turn physics itself into an instrument of justice. The weapon systems that emerged from Project Nemesis defied conventional understanding. Entropy cannons that could age metal to dust in seconds. Quantum cascade missiles that deleted their targets from space-time itself. Gravity manipulation fields that could compress matter into microscopic black holes. Dimensional phase technology that allowed ships to exist in multiple realities simultaneously. Reality editing beams that could rewrite the fundamental constants of physics in localized areas. But the most devastating innovation was the consciousness integration matrix, using the quantum echoes of Crimson Dawn's destroyed population. Human weapons could now be guided by the memories and emotions of the massacre victims. 75,000 voices would direct humanity's vengeance, their final moments transformed, from endings into beginnings of something unprecedented in galactic history. The fleet emerges. Captain Rebecca Ironhawk Martinez stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution, humanity's first reality warfare vessel, and felt the quantum ghosts of Crimson Dawn flowing through the ship's consciousness matrix. The voices of the dead whispered guidance through her neural interface. Their collective will focused on a single purpose, ensuring that what happened to them never happened to anyone else. The human fleet that decloaked at the edge of Krillian space bore no resemblance to the ships that had carried colonists to distant worlds. These vessels existed partially outside normal space-time, their hulls shifting through dimensions that the Krillians couldn't even perceive. Reality bent around them like water around stones, creating areas where the normal laws of physics simply didn't apply. Krillian border stations are detecting our approach, reported Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim from the sensor station. They're trying to communicate, but their transmissions are being absorbed by our dimensional buffers. They can't even touch us with conventional weapons. Martinez smiled coldly as the tactical display showed Krillian patrol fleets moving to intercept 12 heavy cruisers against humanity's revenge, the same odds that had existed over Crimson Dawn, but the balance of power had shifted in ways the aliens couldn't comprehend. The dead had taught humanity new mathematics, new physics, new ways to express their anger through the fundamental forces of creation. All ships, this is Iron Hawk, she announced over the fleet communications network. Today we speak for 75,000 voices that were silenced by cowards. Today we teach the galaxy that humanity protects its own. Today we show the Krillians what happens when you mistake our compassion for weakness. The war that wasn't. The first Krillian patrol fleet opened fire with everything they had. Plasma bombardment cannons, kinetic projectiles, antimatter torpedoes, gravitational mines. The humans watched with detached interest as the weapons passed harmlessly through their ships, the energy being absorbed and redirected into the dimensional spaces between realities. It was like trying to hurt a shadow with conventional light. War Marshal Vextar received the reports from his border commanders with growing alarm. Human ships that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Weapons that fired concentrated entropy and deleted matter from existence. Attacks that seemed to be guided by the memories of dead humans, targeting Krillian vessels with impossible precision and personal hatred. How were they doing this? He demanded of his science officers. Their technology was inferior 6 months ago. They barely had functional plasma weapons. Now they're manipulating the fundamental forces of reality itself. The answer came from his intelligence division, but it was too terrifying to accept. Humanity had somehow weaponized grief itself, turning their mourning for Crimson Dawn into technology that transcended normal physics. They had made the dead into living weapons, quantum ghosts that guided missiles and powered reality warping engines. Every human killed in the massacre had become a component in humanity's revenge machine. The Krillian Empire's greatest strength, their willingness to commit genocide as a form of communication, had become their fatal weakness. They had given humanity something to remember, something to mourn, something to transform into pure retribution guided by the consciousness of those they had murdered. The final message, Admiral Thompson's image, appeared on every Krillian communication system simultaneously. His words transmitted through quantum channels that couldn't be blocked or interrupted. The old soldier looked directly into the camera, his eyes carrying the weight of 75,000 lost souls and the promise of justice that would follow. I am Admiral Marcus Thompson of the United Earth Fleet. 6 months ago, you sent us a message about territorial boundaries and consequences. Today, we're sending our reply. His voice remained calm, professional, but everyone listening could hear the iron underneath. War Marshal Vextar Grimm, you recorded the murder of our colonists. You made children's toys melt while their parents watched. You turned our dreams into ash and called it diplomacy. The transmission continued as human ships phased through Krillian defenses like ghosts passing through walls. Reality warped around the advancing fleet, creating spaces where Krillian weapons couldn't function and human vengeance could express itself without limitation. The dead of Crimson Dawn guided every shot, their quantum signatures ensuring that no Krillian vessel could escape the reckoning that had been 6 months in the making. You wanted to teach us about consequences, Thompson continued as the Krillian Empire's greatest fleet died around Vextar's flagship. Allow us to return the favor. This is what happens when you mistake human compassion for weakness. This is what happens when you think our children's lives are acceptable losses in your political games. This is what happens when you forget that humanity remembers everything. The War Marshal's flagship died last, its reality slowly unraveling, as human weapons rewrote the fundamental constants that held his ship together. As his bridge dissolved around him, Vextar finally understood the true nature of the species he had tried to intimidate. Humans didn't just fight wars, they perfected them. Every defeat taught them. Every loss made them stronger. Every death became a weapon in their hands. The last thing he saw was Captain Martinez's face on his view screen, speaking with the voices of 75,000 ghosts. Crimson Dawn Colony sends its regards. The new galaxy. In the months that followed, the galaxy learned new lessons about humanity. The Krillian Empire's territories were redistributed to species that had suffered under their rule. Their weapons technology was adapted for peaceful purposes. Their former victims were given the resources to rebuild and grow strong enough to defend themselves. The ruins of Crimson Dawn became a memorial, but not to defeat. The quantum echoes of the murdered colonists were given permanent form in crystalline matrices that allowed visitors to experience their memories, their dreams, their final moments, and their transformation into humanity's conscience. The dead had become immortal, their voices now part of every human ship that traveled between stars. Other species throughout the galaxy received a clear message. Humans were no longer the naive explorers who could be intimidated by shows of force. They had evolved beyond conventional warfare into something unprecedented. A species that could transform tragedy into transcendence, grief into power, memory into mathematics that rewrote reality itself. And in the depths of space, new human colonies continued to grow under the protection of fleets guided by quantum ghosts, ensuring that what happened to Crimson Dawn would never happen again. The dead had taught the living how to make the impossible possible, and the galaxy would never be the same.